33, take one.
I was interested in theatre design and was a walk-on player at the Scottish National Players for a short while, in which I'd made a huge and terribly important discovery, which is I have no talent at all as an actor.
Mackendrick's family had hoped that he'd be a portrait painter, maybe even a great portrait painter. But during the Depression years, he quit Glasgow Art School and he went into advertising.
I used my skill as an illustrator in doing sit-up sketches to parlay myself into the director's chair, really. And I've always done drawing, which is my equivalent of writing, really, because I think in terms of images. But once I've done the drawings, I hardly ever keep to them, because I regard them really as my rehearsals. And the great sort of fallacy is the idea that careful pre-planning like that in some way ties you down. It doesn't, it frees you. The reason why they took me on was that they felt, I think probably correctly, that words were not my strong point, certainly not dialogue. And so I had developed a certain knack for thinking in terms of visual action, and they thought I could bring to this sort of lavish thing a certain sort of pictorial abilities. It is quite true that the walls of my office are covered with drawings of films that I never made, never got to make. I don't feel tremendous regret about that here. They were things that I went back to work on while waiting for something else to happen. It's been suggested on occasion that things like Mary Queen of Scots, which I worked on for about 20 years or something like that here. It's probably a good thing that it never was made, because one can always go back to it and dream about it. Alec's first suggestion for it was they should play as a spastic. And in my office, he gave an imitation of a cripple here, which was really gruesome, horrendously funny, but stomach-turning in its effect. So we had to say, no, I'm sorry, Sir Michael Balcom will never stand for that. So Alec got rather annoyed, sulked for a little bit, and went away and looked out of the window. And when I went on talking about the script, he was snipping away with a pair of scissors, and he made some paper teeth, which he stuck in, and turned round and grinned at me. He had decided that his second choice, was to play it as an imitation of a friend of ours, the late Kenneth Tynan, who was a friend of Alex and a friend of mine. And that's what it was. I mean, the mannerisms of these false teeth and this lank, fair hair, and the long scarf that he keeps training on, and the habit of smoking a cigarette. All of those are imitations of Kenneth Tynan, slightly, more than slightly exaggerated for Gothic effect. The period during which you watch Alec develop those mannerisms of behavior is an exhilarating period for the director. And it's one in which I think you learn as a director to know your role as somebody who just sits back and watches and provides the space in which the actor can do his own work. This, I keep saying to students, is one of the hardest things for the director, particularly the young director, to learn, which is to watch, to listen, and to keep your mouth shut, to provide the support without intruding upon the space that the actor needs to work in.
1950. Not all the Ealing comedies were Tibby Clark's warm and slightly eccentric observation, or Pertwee and Hamer's stylish black comedy. In 1950, Balcom made The Man in the White Suit. This was a marvellous idea, which could have been developed in all sorts of ways. The script was adapted, and the film was directed by Sandy Mackendrick as a piece of lightly satirical social comment.
Man in the White Suit is based on a play by my cousin, Roger McDougall. Roger never got it put on, and it was lying around, so I asked him if I could adapt it to a film, and I'm afraid I treated it rather ruthlessly. Roger was angry at the beginning, but finally he helped, because we took a minor character and made it the central figure and cut out his hero. The central figure is a young scientist who invents a cloth that never gets dirty and never wears out.
there we are.
Well, I think I told Mick later something that I'm afraid he didn't know at the time, which is that I encouraged Cecil Parker to base his role on Mick himself. The film is full of some personal caricatures of that kind, perhaps really because when I was a young man I always wanted to be a political cartoonist, and that's the sort of thing it is. It caricatures not only people but also attitudes. And Mick represents the liberal attitude. To call a man a liberal these days is to use a very dirty word.
Why can't you scientists leave things alone? What about my bit of washing when there's no washing to do?
Both workers and big business unite to suppress this menace to their livelihood. Mackendrick ended the film with a revolutionary white suit disintegrating on its inventor.
I remember before we started shooting, I tried to tell the story of the man in the white suit to a Scots friend of mine. I was trying to make it sound as entertaining as possible, and all the way through, the most I could get out of him was a sort of slight smile and a glint in the eye. But when I came to the end, the time when the scientist is lynched, or practically lynched, by both sides, at that point he gave a great sort of Gallic guffaw, and he said, "Sandy, that's very good, that's not funny." And I think that's as good a definition of my own kind of possibly slightly malicious attitude to humor. The best jokes, the ones that really make me laugh, are the ones that have an element that is not quite funny.
It's coming to pieces! Where's Dave? Look! Sir John!
I do remember that much later, after I'd made a number of other films, and when we were planning to do the Ladykillers, when he was giving us approval to go ahead, Mick had me in his office and said, I want to tell you that I've given a promise on your behalf that there's no satire in this one.
1955 and the Ladykillers.
Yeah. What's all this about, Doc? Take out your instruments. Not Doc this time, Harry. Professor.
Bill Rose's story of a little old lady who gets involved with an extraordinary band of crooks who pose as a string quintet while they do a robbery. They stay in her boarding house.
It is Mr. Harvey. Come in. The others are all here.
For the old lady's boarding house, Ealing mocked up a sham house here at the back of King's Cross Station. They found there was a genuine house number waiting for them to put on it, which was rather spooky. The fake house straddled that wall at the end of the street. In fact, there was a real lamppost in the fake parlour. 15 years later, there's no trace left of the sham house. The whole area is being demolished, and the steam trains of the film are now diesel. But how marvellous the house looked back in 1955.
Right from the first shot, you know you're in kind of a magic world with Ladykillers, because it's a top shot looking down on the street with the terrace houses on the side and that odd little house at the end of it and the railway lines behind. I think it's a brilliant shot. It just says, here we are, folks, get ready. This scene when all of her friends come for tea, all those old women, it's fantastic. And it's the woman in blue with the very silly hat, who's always the last one, who's got to be dragged away, because she floats off screen.
I'm sorry, but we mustn't let them play, Louisa. Press the letters, I'm sorry, they will come in. It's nice when we're having our concerts. Come here, yes, we will have tea by and by. Now, Amelia, if you don't mind, they'll all come, I'm sure.
You think she's got them all out, because all we can see in the frame is it's clear of the little old ladies, and then the camera shifts over, and there's one more.
Dearly say, dear, we'll just go in the sitting room. Yes, if you don't mind, I'm
I
sure.
think you can learn everything you need to know about comedy whether it's movement, whether it's dialogue, whether it's character, it's all in that film.